The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above the classroom, but the real tension came from the silence that followed Mr. Peters' roll call. He smiled warmly at some students, calling them by first name, praising their efforts before class even began. But when it came to Jamal, he barely glanced up. "You're late again," Mr. Peters muttered, even though Jamal had been seated since the bell rang. Laughter rippled from the back row. Jamal's jaw tightened, but he stayed quiet. This wasn't new. Everyone in room 204 had seen the favoritism. The way certain kids, all sharing the same background, were encouraged, while others were silenced or humiliated. Most stayed quiet, afraid to challenge authority. But Maya, sitting 3 seats away, had had enough. With her phone angled just so, she pressed record. That day, the injustice unfolded clearly. A white student interrupted twice without reprimand, while Jamal was punished for raising his hand out of turn. When Mr. Peters praised Emily for an answer Jamal had given minutes earlier, Maya's stomach turned. She captured every second. By the time the final bell rang, Maya knew this wasn't just another bad day at school. It was evidence. Evidence that could no longer be ignored. Hours later, the clip hit social media. By morning, it had thousands of views. By lunch, tens of thousands. And by the end of the week, the quiet suburban town that prided itself on being fair and inclusive was on fire with debate. Parents, teachers, students, and neighbors were suddenly forced to ask, what does justice look like when prejudice hides in plain sight? The fluorescent lights hummed faintly above room 204, their pale glow spilling across rows of desks arranged with military precision. Posters of famous scientists lined the back wall: Einstein, Curie, Newton, while motivational slogans curled at the edges of their taped corners. On the whiteboard, in neat block letters, the day's lesson objective was written: Newton's laws of motion, application and analysis. Mr. Peters, tall and angular, with glasses perched precariously on the bridge of his nose, stood at the front with his clipboard. His reputation as one of the tough but fair teachers in Maplewood High was well known. At least that's what most parents believed. But the students in his class, especially the ones whose skin color set them apart from the majority, knew another side of him, one that was quieter, sharper, and far less fair. "Good morning, Emily," Mr. Peters said warmly, as a blonde student walked in. He smiled broadly. "Always on time, as expected." Emily grinned and slipped into her seat at the front. Then came Jamal, tall, broad-shouldered, with a quiet intensity in his eyes. He had been sitting at his desk before the bell rang, his notebook open, pencil poised. Still, as Mr. Peters glanced his way, his lips pressed into a thin line. "You're late again," Mr. Peters muttered, even though Jamal had been seated since the bell rang. Laughter rippled from the back row. Jamal's jaw tightened, but he stayed quiet. From the third row, Maya shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She was sharp-eyed and quiet, the kind of student who often noticed what others missed. Today, her phone sat nestled against her backpack, the camera angled just enough to catch the scene. Her finger hovered over the record button, and after a beat of hesitation, she pressed it. The lesson began. "Now," Mr. Peters said, pacing at the front of the class, "who can remind us of Newton's first law?" Emily's hand shot up. Before she could answer, Jamal raised his. "Yes, Emily," Mr. Peters called, ignoring Jamal. "An object in motion stays in motion unless acted upon by an external force." "Excellent," he said, smiling. "Perfect, as always." Jamal lowered his hand, staring at his notebook. A whisper of irritation crossed his face, but he buried it quickly. Maya's phone caught everything: the raised hand, the dismissal, the smile. Minutes later, Jamal tried again. When Mr. Peters asked for an example of inertia, Jamal raised his hand. "Yes," Peters said, his tone clipped. Well, if you're in a car and it stops suddenly, your body keeps moving forward until... That's not quite right, Mr. Peters cut in, turning away before Jamal finished. His eyes swept the room. Anyone else? A boy in the back raised his hand. Like when you're playing hockey and the puck slides across the ice? Exactly. Well done, Thomas. Peters beamed. Maya's blood boiled. Jamal's answer had been perfectly correct, and yet it was brushed aside. She tightened her grip on her phone. Every second she recorded felt heavier, more dangerous, but more necessary. By mid-class, the tension had thickened. Emily interrupted twice, speaking out of turn, and both times Peters chuckled and indulged her enthusiasm. When Jamal muttered an answer under his breath, Peters snapped, "If you don't have the patience to wait for your turn, maybe you shouldn't participate at all." The words landed like a slap across the room. Jamal sat back, his eyes burning with quiet fury. A few students exchanged uncomfortable glances, but most stayed silent, unwilling to draw attention to themselves. The breaking point came near the end of class. Mr. Peters posed a challenging problem about force and acceleration. Jamal raised his hand again, cautiously this time. After a pause, Peters nodded to him. If a car accelerates from 0 to 60 in 10 seconds, the average acceleration is 6 meters per second squared. Peters pursed his lips, then turned to Emily. "Emily, do you want to give it a try?" Emily blinked. 6 meters per second squared? Correct, he announced, his face lighting up. Jamal's pencil snapped in his hand. A few gasps echoed around the room. Maya's heart pounded as she watched through her screen, recording every second. By the final bell rang, Jamal was the first to leave. He walked with long strides, shoulders stiff, fists clenched so tight his knuckles whitened. Students filed out, their voices low, whispers trailing behind him. Maya lingered, tucking her phone into her bag. Her palms were clammy. She knew she had something powerful, proof that what so many had whispered about was real. But proof could be dangerous. That night, she sat at her desk replaying the video. Her room was dim, lit only by the glow of her laptop screen. Each time she watched Mr. Peters dismiss Jamal, her anger grew. This wasn't just unfair, it was deliberate. And it wasn't just Jamal. She thought back to the countless times other students of color had been brushed aside, reprimanded, or ignored. Her thumb hovered over the upload button. She could post it anonymously. No one would know it was her. She hesitated, heart racing, then whispered, "They need to see this." She pressed upload. The video went live. By morning, it had 3,000 views. By lunch, 20,000. And by the end of the week, the quiet suburban town that prided itself on being fair and inclusive was on fire with debate. Parents, teachers, students, and neighbors were suddenly forced to ask, what does justice look like when prejudice hides in plain sight? The video of Mr. Peters' class had cracked something open in Maplewood, a quiet suburban town that liked to think of itself as immune to the troubles of the outside world. For years, parents boasted about the school's rankings, the pristine sports fields, the college acceptance rates. They told themselves their children grew up in a bubble of fairness and equality. But bubbles burst. By Tuesday morning, the video had been picked up by local news stations. Reporters stood outside Maplewood High, microphones in hand, asking students for interviews. Satellite vans parked along the curb. Parents clustered in small groups, whispering furiously, some clutching their children's hands as though the school itself had become dangerous overnight. Inside, the atmosphere was suffocating. Teachers avoided eye contact in the hallways. Students chose sides. Some, emboldened by the video, began to share their own experiences, moments of being dismissed, talked down to, overlooked. Others dismissed the video as a witch hunt, insisting Mr. Peters was a good man, a respected educator. In the cafeteria, voices rose above the clatter of trays. He's been treating kids like this for years. You just didn't notice because it wasn't happening to you." "That's ridiculous," another snapped. "Mr. Peters is one of the best teachers here. You can't ruin a man's career over one video." Jamal sat at a corner table, earbuds in but no music playing. He kept his gaze fixed on the tabletop, pretending not to hear the storm raging around him. But the truth was, every word pierced him. He hadn't asked for this spotlight. He had wanted only to get through the year, to graduate, to prove himself without anyone lowering the bar or moving it out of reach. Now he was the symbol of a fight he hadn't chosen. Across the room, Maya sat with her friends, though she barely spoke. Guilt pressed heavy against her chest. No one knew she had recorded and posted the video, but watching Jamal bear the weight of it alone made her stomach twist. "Should I tell him?" she thought. "Or would that only make things worse?" That afternoon, the principal called an emergency assembly. The gym filled with students, their voices echoing off the rafters until the principal raised his hand for silence. "We are aware," he began, his voice tight, "of a video circulating on social media that involves one of our teachers. I want to assure you that the administration takes these matters very seriously. We are launching a full investigation. In the meantime, I ask for your patience, your respect, and your discretion." His words hung in the air like smoke, offering no clarity, only tension. Students muttered as they left the gym, more divided than before. By evening, the story had spread beyond Maplewood. Regional outlets picked it up. Hashtags trended online. A well-known activist retweeted the clip, calling it a textbook example of systemic bias in schools. National reporters began sniffing around. The Peters family was suddenly under siege. His wife was hounded at the grocery store. His teenage daughter cried when strangers yelled at her in the parking lot. Mr. Peters himself grew increasingly defensive. He gave a short, stiff interview to the local news, insisting, "I have dedicated my life to teaching. I would never intentionally treat any student unfairly." But the video told its own story. At the next PTA meeting, the auditorium overflowed with angry parents. Some stood at the microphone, voices trembling with rage. "My child has been telling me for years this teacher plays favorites. I dismissed it. I told him to work harder. And now I see I was wrong." Others leapt to Mr. Peters' defense. "He's a good man," a father thundered. "You're going to destroy his career over one misleading clip? This is cancel culture at its worst." Shouts erupted. The principal banged his gavel, but the room was already unraveling. Neighbors turning on each other, the illusion of harmony shattering in real time. Meanwhile, Jamal found himself at the center of a whirlwind he could not control. Reporters lingered outside his house. His mother, exhausted from long shifts at the hospital, grew protective, shooing them away with a fierce glare. His younger brother asked why strangers were yelling at their door. At school, some students rallied around him. They started wearing T-shirts with slogans like "Fairness for All" and "End the Divide." Others mocked him, whispering "teacher's pet" and "race card" as he walked by. The worst came in the locker room after basketball practice. A teammate muttered under his breath, "Bet you're loving the attention, huh?" Jamal spun. "What did you say?" "You heard me," the boy sneered. "You think you're some kind of hero now? You're just making trouble for the rest of us." Fists clenched. Jamal wanted to swing, to let out the fury boiling inside him. But he remembered his mother's words. "Don't give them an excuse to call you angry. Don't let them twist the story." So he turned and walked out, his chest heaving, the words burning in his throat. For Maya, the guilt became unbearable. She watched Jamal struggle under the spotlight while she remained in the shadows. Finally, one afternoon after class, she gathered her courage and approached him at his locker. "Jamal," she said softly. He looked up, wary. "Yeah?" Her voice shook. "It was me. I recorded the video." His eyes widened, then narrowed. "What?" "I couldn't stand watching it happen anymore. I didn't mean for it to blow up like this. I just thought People needed to see the truth. Jamal stared at her, anger and gratitude warring in his expression. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he shook his head. "You don't get it," he muttered. "Now they see me, not him. They don't care about the truth. They just want someone to blame, and I'm the one paying the price." Maya's chest tightened. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He slammed his locker shut. "Sorry doesn't fix it." That night, Maya lay awake replaying his words. She hadn't expected thanks, but the weight of his anger cut deep. Still, she couldn't shake the belief that exposing the truth had been the right thing to do. As days stretched into weeks, the investigation intensified. Teachers whispered in break rooms. Parents sent angry emails. Students staged walkouts demanding justice. Signs appeared outside the school. "Equality now! Fire Peters! Support our teachers!" The town was fractured. Friends stopped speaking. Church groups split. Even within families, dinner tables turned into battlegrounds. And in the middle of it all stood Jamal, silent, weary, but unbroken. Winter crept into Maplewood with bitter winds and skies the color of steel. But the cold outside was nothing compared to the chill that had settled over the town. Neighbors avoided eye contact. Old friends no longer waved from across the street. The town that once boasted of its unity now stood divided. Every conversation circling back to one question. Was Mr. Peters guilty of racism, or was he being unfairly judged? The school board convened a special hearing. The gymnasium was packed, standing room only. Reporters lined the back wall, cameras blinking red. Parents clutched their coats tightly, faces taut with tension. On one side of the aisle, supporters of Jamal sat with posters reading "We see you" and "Fairness for all." On the other, defenders of Mr. Peters held up signs like "Innocent until proven guilty" and "Save our teacher." When Mr. Peters entered, a murmur rippled through the crowd. He looked smaller somehow. His shoulders stooped, his eyes shadowed by sleepless nights. His lawyer spoke first, insisting the video had been taken out of context, that Jamal was not being targeted, that Mr. Peters was a dedicated educator with a spotless record. Then the board played the video. The gym fell silent. Every dismissal, every interruption, every moment of favoritism unfolded on the screen. Some gasped. Others looked away. A few muttered, "That's exactly what my kid told me." When the lights came back on, the air was thick with something undeniable. Excuses rang hollow against the clarity of what they had all just witnessed. Jamal was called to speak. His heart hammered as he walked to the microphone. He hated public speaking, hated the way people stared, but he knew this moment mattered. "My name is Jamal," he began, voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "For a long time, I thought maybe I was imagining it, that maybe I wasn't good enough, that if I just worked harder, people would see me the same as anyone else. But the truth is, no matter how much I tried, I was always treated differently. Not just me, others too. We just never had proof. Now you've all seen it. You can't unsee it. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" The room erupted in murmurs. Jamal stepped back, shoulders shaking, but relief washed over him. For the first time, he had spoken his truth without fear. Maya sat near the front, her hands clenched in her lap. She wanted to stand up and say, "It was me who recorded it. It was me who lit this fire." But she stayed silent, knowing the focus needed to stay on Jamal, not her. After hours of testimony, the board announced their decision. Mr. Peters would be placed on indefinite leave while the district implemented mandatory bias and equity training for all staff. They also promised the creation of a student advisory council to give voice to those who felt unheard. The verdict pleased some, enraged others. Outside, the crowd split again. Cheers on one side, boos on the other. Reporters swarmed Jamal as he tried to leave, microphones thrust into his face. he pushed through, exhausted, his mother shielding him with a fierce glare. For Mr. Peters, the fall was swift and merciless. The man who once strode confidently through the halls now hid from cameras, his reputation shattered. Privately, he fumed, insisting he had been misunderstood. But alone in his study late at night, he replayed the video, over and over. Slowly, painfully, he began to see what others saw. The sharpness in his tone with certain students, the warmth he reserved for only others. Denial gave way to doubt, and doubt gave way to shame. Meanwhile, the school began to change. The first equity workshop was tense, teachers shifting uncomfortably as trainers spoke about unconscious bias. Some resisted, rolling their eyes, muttering about political correctness. But others listened, and slowly, cracks appeared in the wall of denial. Students, too, found their voices. The new advisory council held open forums. Stories poured out about being overlooked, about unfair discipline, about feeling invisible. For the first time, the silence was broken. Maya sat near the front, her hands clenched in her lap. She wanted to stand up and say, "It was me who recorded it. It was me who lit this fire." But she stayed silent, knowing the focus needed to stay on Jamal, not her. After hours of testimony, the board announced their decision. Mr. Peters would be placed on indefinite leave while the district implemented mandatory bias and equity training for all staff. They also promised the creation of a student advisory council to give voice to those who felt unheard. The verdict pleased some, enraged others. Outside, the crowd split again. Cheers on one side, boos on the other. Reporters swarmed Jamal as he tried to leave, microphones thrust into his face. He pushed through, exhausted, his mother shielding him with a fierce glare. For Mr. Peters, the fall was swift and merciless. The man who once strode confidently through the halls now hid from cameras, his reputation shattered. Privately, he fumed, insisting he had been misunderstood. But alone in his study late at night, he replayed the video over and over. Slowly, painfully, he began to see what others saw. The sharpness in his tone with certain students, the warmth he reserved for only others. Denial gave way to doubt, and doubt gave way to shame. Meanwhile, the school began to change. The first equity workshop was tense, teachers shifting uncomfortably as trainers spoke about unconscious bias. Some resisted, rolling their eyes, muttering about political correctness. But others listened, and slowly, cracks appeared in the wall of denial. Students, too, found their voices. The new advisory council held open forums. Stories poured out about being overlooked, about unfair discipline, about feeling invisible. For the first time, the silence was broken. Maya finally confessed to him one afternoon after a council meeting. "I need you to know," she said quietly, "I was the one who posted the video. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner." He studied her for a long moment. The anger he had once felt had cooled into something more complex. "You did what I couldn't," he said at last. "You showed them the truth. I hated you for it, but maybe it had to be you, because if it was me, they wouldn't have listened." Her eyes filled with tears. "I just wanted it to stop." He nodded. "Me too." Spring arrived, and with it, graduation season. The auditorium buzzed with anticipation, parents snapping photos, caps and gowns rustling. When Jamal's name was called, he walked to the stage with his head high. The cheers that erupted weren't unanimous, but they were loud, and for the first time, he felt seen. As valedictorian, Emily gave the traditional speech about hard work and dreams. Then, unexpectedly, the principal invited Jamal to say a few words. He stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces, some supportive, some skeptical, all watching. He took a deep breath. "This year has been hard. Harder than I ever expected, but it taught me something important. Change doesn't come from staying quiet. It doesn't come from pretending everything is fine. It comes when people are brave enough to tell the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. We can't erase the past, but we can choose what kind of future we want to build. One where every student feels valued, every voice is heard, every person is treated with respect. That's the future I want, and I hope it's the future you want too. The room fell silent. Then slowly, applause began. It swelled, filling the auditorium, not unanimous, but undeniable. Jamal stepped down from the stage, heart racing, but lighter than he had felt in months. Maya met his eyes from the audience, and for the first time since it all began, they both smiled. The divide in Maplewood wasn't gone. Healing would take years. But a crack had been made, and through it, light was beginning to shine.